So, hello to all of you. I am very pleased to say good morning, Brazil, and good afternoon, Israel. I am honored to open this webinar. My name is Manny Broid. I am originally from Mexico. I am a partner at Pearl Cohen, which is one of the largest Israeli law firms. And one of my partners, Ilana, is also participating at this event. He is originally from Uruguay, so that we both, of course, are of Latin American background. Our mother tongue is Spanish, unfortunately not Portuguese. As partners at Pearl Cohen, we co-chair the Latin America desk. And because of our background, we have a personal wish to help to increase the relationships between Latin American entities and Israeli entities. Frankly speaking, we see great relationships between participants from all over the world, Japan, China, United States, Europe, and Israel, mainly in high tech, including, of course, AgriTech. And we believe that we should devote efforts in order to increase the participation and the relationships between Israeli entities and Latin American entities in general, and Brazil, which is the most important country in Latin America in particular. I am talking about AgriTech in particular, and also about high tech in general. We believe that Brazil entities can be much more involved in the Israeli ecosystem of the high tech. And we also see as one of our goals to help the Israeli entities in the AgriTech, agri-food industries to penetrate Brazil. The purpose of this webinar is to be practical, I would say. We would like to communicate to the participants that you will have all available contacts and information necessary to make things happen. I mean, our goal is that after this webinar, even though it is only 1.5 hours, that you will feel that things can happen, that the transactions between Brazil and Israel can be concluded. And this is our main goal. This we will achieve through presentations by participants that, as I believe you will see, will provide you with very helpful information and that will be very good contacts for you. I would like to ask that if you have any questions, that you communicate them via the chat, and we will address them at the end of the seminar. And with this, I conclude my opening. I would like to wish you a successful webinar. And now I would like to request my colleague Tiago from Brazil to make his introduction. Many thanks and have a good webinar.
Thank you very much, Manny. On behalf of myself and Pinheiro Neto, I'd like to thank all the panelists here and everyone that has joined our webinar for today. I'm a partner of Pinheiro Neto, a law firm in Brazil, but I won't bore you too much here. I'm just sharing my screen, but I won't bore you too much with the information of our firm. Just quick highlights here, and everyone that is interested to know more about us can get in touch with us or check our website. But what I wanted to do, in addition of thanking everyone that has joined us today, is to actually introduce you to our main key speaker of this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, is Gabriela from the Brazilian Confederation of Agriculture and Livestock. If there is someone in Brazil that can talk about the Brazilian agribusiness, this is CNA. Has been founded in 1951 and has been the main forum to discuss Brazilian agribusiness policies in Brazil. They do represent over 2 million farmers in the country. And they have a whole system spread all over the country, getting the grasp of what are the needs of the agribusiness system, of the agribusiness sector, and what we actually need, and what the agribusiness in Brazil is today, and how we are today. So without any further ado, so that we can stick on time here, I will pass on the microphone here to Gabriela, and once again, thank you all for your presence today in our webinar. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Thiago and Pinheiro Neto and Pierre Cohen for inviting us to talk a little bit about agriculture today. Just a disclaimer, agriculture in Brazil is a very complex system and a very interesting system. So I try to put data and information that could be engaging for AgriTechs in Israel, but also to bring some curiosity about it. So I will not be able to talk about all the details, but by the end of the presentation, you have my contact, and we have a really huge team to give more information and helpful, could help AgriTechs in Israel, and we can help with the doubts. So I will start to share my screen. Just a minute. So I'm Gabriela. I work in the economic department in CNA, and also an economist. And there's some topics that we are not so familiar with, as I said, but we have the staff that are really specialized in the agenda, so we can talk about it later. So the idea is to bring some numbers about the agribusiness so we can have a really clear picture of how the sector works in Brazil. So here I have a map presenting some data showing where are the most, among Brazilian states, which states are the biggest in terms of the value of production. So when we talk about value of production, we're not only talk about crops, we talk about crops and livestock. So you can see that Mato Grosso is the biggest state in terms of the value of production, also Paraná. And we have like, in different regions, we have different kinds of agricultural production. So we say that the Brazilian is a huge player in the international market because of its the tropical agriculture system that we developed for our country. So what are the results of it? Nowadays, the soybean is the most important product for our production, but also the livestock as beef and other products. Sorry, I have some issue here. Okay, so to really give a clear picture of how the agribusiness works in Brazil, it's important to say that each region and maybe each state and each municipality has different ways to produce. So I can show here some pictures. For example, the difference between a production system in the south of Brazil and the north of Brazil. So both of those production systems coexist at the same time. For example, here you can see some pictures of the storage facilities, but also the coffee facilities. So when we talk, if you want to sell technology or create innovation for the sector, you need to understand that each state, each municipality has his own issues, his own demands, and his own way to produce. So these all pictures of properties that CNA has visited with international representatives. So it's really interesting. If you want to know more about it, you can access our international website. So another interesting data is that crop and livestock are both very important and important for different regions. So here I present some information about the most important crop or livestock by state. So you understand depending on what innovation you have, what state you should focus on to work with. So here is a really important subject for agribusiness in Brazil, because we say that we have the most not restricted, but a really good forest code. So you can see in the Amazon region, 80% of the territory is protected. What does it mean? That you cannot produce, you only can produce in 20% of the territory. So maintaining and conserve forests is a really important issue, and Brazil is has a really strict forest code to protect the country, at the same time enable the development of the agribusiness in the country. So here's an example of a really interesting system that Brazilian agriculture sector has developed. It's called the Integrated Crop Livestock Forest System, where you produce all these three at the same time. So it's a really innovative way to produce, and it's a really sustainable way to produce. We are working to spread this technology among the country. So you can see more information about it later. This is a picture. Again, it's important to see what is agriculture, because it's not only about the data. You need to see with your own eyes what is going on. So about economic relevance, the sector represents almost 22% of the GDP of the country, so it's really a strong sector. Almost half of the exports are also from agribusiness, and 1/3 of the workforce comes also from the sector. So one important issue is that agriculture is not the same thing that agribusiness. So when we talk about agribusiness, we say about all those sectors, not only the primary activities, but also the agri-industry, agri-service, inputs, international trade. So we are also a very important player in the international area. Most of our exports are also soybeans and corn and poultry. Again, the livestock and the grains are really the most important in terms of value for the country. We are the biggest producers and exporters for almost all those products, as sugar, coffee, orange juice, soybean. So one thing that we need to really pay attention is that we have observed a lot of growth in the last years, but agricultural trade is slowing down. So exports are really important. We see some opportunities, mostly for the coffee, special coffee, fruits, really products that can only come from Brazil, for example, or they can have a added value in terms of it. But export probably they will maintain, but we can see that they will not grow so fast as they used to grow before. Another issue that we need to pay attention when we talk about agribusiness in Brazil, that we still have a lot of shipping and logistics issues that we need to improve. Also, trade agreements and trade restrictions can cause problems for the sector. We think that as most of our products are food, so countries are really worried with the quality of the food and the supply of food. maybe it is not, maybe we are not being impacted, but is also something that you need to pay attention. And norms, private standards, and certificates, we also need to pay attention, and we invest a lot on all those topics. So about what is going on right now and what probably will happen after the COVID crisis. Agribusiness is the agricultural sector in terms of GDP is the only sector right now in the Brazilian economy that is not decreasing. We are not growing so fast right now, but we're not decreasing as the service industry and the other sectors. Mostly because of the exports, but also because we produce food, so people need food even with crisis. But in the last years also we have been observing the decrease of the international commodity prices, so we need to invest to increase productivity and also the yields for the farmers. And exchange rates is also being an issue. It's good for the sector because we export a lot, but most of our inputs are imported. So tools to protect farmers from the volatility of prices and the inputs is really important. So here's some data I will not talk about because of our time, but we can talk about it later. So what is changing in the sector? First, most of our increase in we did not increase the crop area. We increased the production with agricultural savings and with a lot of technology to invest in it. As I said, corn and soybeans are the most important crops for Brazil. But we are increasing a lot of productivity and we still need to increase it more. Mostly because we have a lot of degraded pastures that we can transform to crop fields and start to produce more grains on it. So one very important agenda for us is the crop and livestock insurance. The market is not so well developed in Brazil. So we think this could be an opportunity for AgriTechs in Israel because farmers are looking for this kind of service, and it's really important because of the changes that are happening, because we say that agribusiness is a open sky industry, so we are always, the weather is always an issue for the sector. For example, the companies could work to develop marketplace and customize products for the sector. When we compare to United States, for example, we see that Brazilian coverage level of crops and livestock is really low. So we see a lot of potential to develop this market in Brazil. Irrigation, as we see later, for a really real example in the field, is an import issue, and we have a distribution of irrigation around the country, but it's also very important to produce in Brazil because of our weather, we are able to produce 2 crops or sometimes 3 crops per year. But to do it, we need irrigation in some states. So there is a lot of opportunity on it. Challenges. As I said, we had sometimes the license and the regulation to access irrigation is kind of complex. Rural roads are still a problem. Logistic and port facility, as I already said. And another issue when we talk about innovation technology, most of the properties are offline. So we have a great 4G broadband around the country, but in the rural areas, the access is not quite good. As we can see here, 72% of the rural properties don't have access to any kind of of internet connections, and sometimes even to make a call or something that is really simple is not something that you can do in the rural areas. So this is a big opportunity for the innovation sector. So we have another really interesting project in CNA. There is the AgriUp. We try to identify the demands and the issues for farmers in the field. So most of the complaints are about the expenditure and mostly with inputs. So if you have a technology to help to increase the yield and decrease the expenditure with inputs, this could be a really great. As I said, most of it is important and the cost is quite high. Distribution channels are also an issue. We have some marketplaces working already, but this is something that could be good for the sector. We have a lot of intermediary business, so farmers are not able to sell directly to consumers or to export. They need to sell to a trading company. So there are a lot of things to do. And regulations, licenses, all these issues are kind of complex, and information is a great asset in the sector. So if you organize something that could help farmers to understand more about best practices and also about how to emit a license or understand better regulations, is really a good opportunity, and they have a lot of interest on it. So the most, when we talk about production expenditure, most farmers talk about the chemicals, fertilizers, seeds, also the farm services, labor, the rent, interest rates, as Thiago will talk a little bit later. Funding is a really opportunity for the sector. We have some companies, fintechs and innovative technologies, but is also a market that we can see opportunities on it. So how you access, how you communicate with those farmers? In Brazil, WhatsApp, as I said, we don't have so great connection with internet, but WhatsApp is probably the main way to communicate with those farmers. So you have a market department or campaigns. WhatsApp probably could be a really good way to talk with them. Radio stations are also a good way to talk with those farmers, and specialized media. So if you want to present your technology or your idea for farmers in Brazil, you can try to find specialized channels to present on it.
Gabriela, I am really sorry to interrupt. Just we have very limited time, and okay. I would like to ask if you can make some closing statements. Sorry about that.
This is the last one. Actually, I'm not able to see the clock here. Sorry. Perfect. Thank you, Benny. So this is the last one. I present some data and a report about the AgriTech ecosystem in Brazil. So if you want to know what kind of companies we already have, what the sectors that will work on it, this is the research Embrapa publications, really interesting. It is in Portuguese, but there are a lot of specialized channels talking about it on English on articles. So it is, sorry about the time, that's all. We can talk about it later. I have my contact here. Sorry, Manny.
No, sorry. Everything is perfect, Gabriela. Many thanks for your very interesting and helpful information and presentation. I believe that now the Israeli AgriTech companies know that CNA is such an important AgriTech, agri-food entity in Brazil, agriculture in general, and they have your contact details, and I think it will be very practical for them to know that they can contact you directly. Now, as we all know, Brazil is a super important country from Israeli perspective in the AgriTech world industry. every Israeli agri-tech company wishes to penetrate Brazil. On the other hand, we know that it's not easy, neither from a marketing perspective nor from legal perspective. And we have our friend and colleague Tiago from Pinheiro Neto, who will give you some hints as to how to safely land in Brazil. So please, Tiago.
Thank you, Manny. Thank you, Gabriela, for the very interesting and complete presentation about the Brazilian agribusiness sector and its needs. And I'll try to, in my time, allotted time here, to discuss a little bit how to safely land in Brazil, how to come to Brazil, and what are the main legal aspects that you should consider. And the first thing, or the first question you may be asking yourselves is, should I invest in Brazil, or can I invest in Brazil? And of course, the answer is you definitely can. And the Brazilian legal environment has been improving a lot over the last decade, if you will, to grab more foreign investment. We are a country that is in great need of foreign investment as an emerging market. And the legislation has not been absent to that need. Brazilian legislation and regulation is evolving very positively to foster new investments in the country. So just to set up, just as an example, to set up your business in Brazil today, you just take 1 day, and certain easier license you can even obtain in just up to 1 week, which means that you can set up your business very quickly in our country. As Gabriela pointed out in her presentation, we are a very big country in size, and we are half South America, guys. So it's very important information that even though we do still have a little bit difficulties of internet connection in the rural areas, it is a country that is fostering electronic signatures. Not only the country, but when I mean the country, it's the legislation of the country and the regulation of the country is fostering the whole digitalization process. So we are now seeing new laws and more laws accepting electronic documents, electronic signatures, and even perfection of collateral in certain cases, also by electronic means. And another question that you might be asking yourselves is, how will I be treated by the Brazilian judiciary if I have to sort out any disputes in Brazilian judiciary as being a foreigner or a local subsidiary of a foreign company? And what we can tell you is that the Brazilian judiciary has no discrimination of foreigners. They do not have a bias when they are reviewing a case just by the fact that one of the parties is a Brazilian. The Brazilian judges tend to be very technical on their decision. And they apply rule of law, and they tend to apply the enforceability of contracts. What the parties have agreed and what they have established in a contract. And in the same trend of the digitalization process, the Brazilian judiciary became digital as well. Today, all the Brazilian proceedings are electronic. So this is increasing the speed on how the Brazilian judiciary react to day-to-day demands. And also, what are we seeing on the level of legislation in the country to foster investment? We are seeing a very good pro-market agenda over the last years. What we have already had, just to say, over the last 2 years in the country, we have the enactment of what we call the economic freedom law. This law set a lot of principles, liberal principles, and a lot of principles that restate the concept that the parties have their own free will, the parties can agree and establish in the agreement their rights and obligations, and that must be observed by law and by the judiciary and the regulators. And the government, whenever advising on new regulations, they must be strict to what is essentially needed, but also they need to be sensible to the economic impact of their regulation. And they have also set up in that law clarifications regarding the investment through investment funds. This is very relevant for private equity investments, especially when we talk about startup investments in Brazil. We also had, in the beginning of this year, quite honestly, during the pandemic, when we were already quarantined in our homes, the enactment of the agribusiness law. This has been the most important piece of legislation for the agribusiness sector over the last years. It has modernized a lot of the instruments that are used to document financing strategies to the sector, and has also been an important boost for the green finance. As you have seen in Gabriela's presentation, we are the country with the biggest area of forest protection in the world, native forest. And we have now a very important piece of legislation that will allow green finance to boom in the country. We also had, on a macro economic perspective, the approval by Brazilian Congress of the pension reform. This was a very important legislation to guard for the solvency of the country over the next decades. And that's not all. Brazilian Congress is reviewing a very important bill of law, which is a tax reform. News this week by the chair of the Brazilian lower house. He mentioned that they expect to be voting in August of this year, the first round of voting for the tax reform, and we'll also have in the roadmap the administrative reform as well as the FX system reform. This is the last one. This last one is a bill of law presented by the Brazilian Central Bank to flexibilize rules regarding currency controls that still exist in the country. And we should also look to how the Brazilian regulators are looking to innovation. I don't think we are in a better moment with the regulators on innovation than over the last years. The Brazilian Securities Commission, just to comment here on a few examples, have already regulated Sandbox for innovative ventures in the capital markets. They have already regulated crowdfunding. During the pandemic, they have quickly reacted and allowed Brazilian corporations to access their shareholders through digital means. And they have also fostered for issuance of bonds overseas to the agribusiness sector. Brazilian Central Bank, in its own hand, has not gone differently from the Brazilian Securities Commission. Brazil has already regulated over more than 2 years ago how fintechs should operate in the country. Payment institutions as well, and very recently the central bank issued open banking regulations. So all of these are already regulated areas of business in which you can have a very clear roadmap on how to do business. And even more, but not less relevant, last but not least, the central bank itself has launched its own platform for immediate payment. This will go live on November of this year. It's called PIX, but that shows how the regulators are, keen on innovation. They have their own systems. But I think another aspect just to cover here on the presentation is what are very likely the main legal aspects that the various players for the agribusiness sectors might be asking themselves today. Innovation might help over those questions. And I think it's important to look to the different parts and the players of the agribusiness sector and to think of what are their needs and their demands from a legal standpoint. The one that you will see very common is credit. We do face a very important aspect about credit. Neither the government, neither the financial system is able to support entirely the credit demand for the sector. The capital markets is growing tremendously over the last years. But this is still an area that demands a lot of attention. And also, as I mentioned before, green finance is booming. And then when you look to the different players, each one have their own questions and doubts. What I can tell you quickly is that almost all of them, we do have a legal way to work it out, but they're all important aspects to be considered. And why I have mentioned credit so much in my presentation, in this fairly quick presentation, is exactly to tell you that do not forget about it when you're coming to Brazil. Your client here being the farmer, the distributor in some cases, or even if you are the AgriTech setting up your own business in Brazil, do not forget about credit. Typically in other jurisdictions, you just knock on the door of a bank and you get your loan. In Brazil, that might be true, but that's not the entire story for getting credit. Who funds Brazilian farmers or the agribusiness sector today in Brazil are, of course, banks, sometimes backed by the Brazilian Development Bank of the NDS and other government lines. But capital markets, as I mentioned, is growing over the last years and tend to keep growing for the coming years. But we do have a very unique scenario. We are one of the few jurisdictions in the world, in the country, if not a very unique one, in which input companies are a big, important finances of the Brazilian agribusiness. Exactly because in order to sell their products, they need to come up with a credit solution for their clients. So not only you need to have a very good idea for innovation on the needs and gaps that the agribusiness sector requires, but also coming up with a credit solution might be a key point to have a successful venture in Brazil. So with that, I will close here my last slide here, Manny promised. Just saying that key aspects and important matters to consider when coming to Brazil, guys. First of all, we do have still currency controls. We have very strict labor laws. Tax laws, as our folks from Young will comment, are very complex in Brazil, and intellectual property is something that you have, of course, in innovation always to consider. But don't forget about logistics and local distribution of your product. Again, as I mentioned, we are half the size. Brazil is half of South America. So your client might be just a few hundred kilometers away, but it also might be a few thousand kilometers away from your head office. So setting up also a way to solve logistics is very important. And again, any solutions and innovations on green bonds, social bonds, or just as a whole sustainable bonds is something very, very booming right now in the country, especially considering the way our agribusiness is. With that, I close my remarks here, Manny, and again, thank you all for joining us.
Iago, many thanks to you. I think that you gave a very good presentation, very useful. I think that you communicated that even though there are problems, you and your law firm can help to solve problems and can help to make things happen. So thank you again. Now now I am honored to request that my colleague Bernard Kiep, General Manager of Bermad Brazil, gives a presentation. I am honored because I am the personal lawyer of Bermad since many years ago. Of course, I work here with the headquarters in Israel. Bermad, I believe, is a very real and very good example of Israeli penetration in AgriTech business to Brazil. And I am sure that we will be able to learn a lot from Bernard. So Bernard, please go ahead, and many thanks for your participation.
Thank you very much, Manny. Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you, Thiago. Very good introduction. Bermad is now for over 30 years in Brazil. And Bermad is still a kibbutz company. We have two kibbutz, Hebron and Sar. And we have been playing in this country that is a great country. I'm Brazilian. And we have really expanded a lot our business. And as Thiago mentioned, it's very important to have three things in mind when you come to Brazil and when you look for Brazilian partners or work with Brazilian partners. One is definitely to have a good lawyer on your side to avoid trouble. The horror stories of Brazil, like you see today on the media, are completely exaggerated. And also all the legal things. Of course, Brazil is not an easy country, but it's not as bad as people normally like to speak about. The other one definitely important thing is that we learned here is that you can definitely use local credit lines, but they're complicated. So Thiago was very right. The cost of capital in Brazil is still very high. So all AgriTechs, all companies that are coming and are working with us in Bermad, we help them, but we definitely recommend them to bring capital from either Europe or the US or wherever it is, because the cost of capital is very high. The third one is the size of the country. The size of the country is pretty big, and I will go now and show my little presentation here. Bermad is a company that is in many segments. We are in the waterworks, so we work a lot with the municipalities, with the states. That's not an easy turf to work. All electronic tenders, very much of documentation, not an easy process. You need a lot of people to work on this, a lot of documentation, regulations. But fortunately, it's growing. And as Thiago said, the crisis is maybe pushing the country to go fast. And we actually hope to have a new laws for the waterworks and that we allow to have more foreign companies to come and to privatize and to move faster. We still have a lot to do in waterworks in Brazil, which on the other hand is an opportunity and means that things will improve. Another segment that we are quite strong, which is here on the left, is what we call the buildings and industries. This is also a completely different go-to-market. You have to have a different strategy in that market. But we have seen that the construction, the building, the industry market is actually doing better than we believed during the COVID-19. And in general, it's an industry that is fun to be. We're doing pretty good at that industry. On the left side, you see what we call fire protection, oil and gas. That has been, of course, in the last years with all the scandals from Petrobras, not exactly easy. But we have done okay, we have performed, and it's an interesting business. In case you hear a tractor now on from the microphone, I'm on a farm and we are operating, we're going well. This is our last segment then, the agriculture, that we will talk a little bit more about. Oops, now it's frozen. There we go. This is a little bit where Bermad is. Bermad has 3 locations in Brazil. We have one in Leme, which is around 200 kilometers north from Sao Paulo. It's where we started. It's where our main warehouse is, where our distribution center is, and where all our people for the agricultural segment are. In Sao Paulo, we have an office that now it's of course closed. We're all doing home office. Here is where we take care of all the other segments. And we have a lot of engineers, very qualified, and it's going well. On the right side, this is partially why we maybe are in this panel. We acquired a Brazilian company over 5 years ago. We improved that company. We did grow that company. And now we have imported products from Israel, imported products from Europe, and also locally made. This is just quickly to show again all the different segments, and we will definitely focus more on the agriculture segment with our different products. And let's talk a little bit about the AgriTech side, the so-called ecosystem from the startups. Here you see a picture from some of our colleagues into what I call the high-end crops, the digitalization of agriculture. We are seeing this segment is not developing as fast as maybe California or other places in Europe, but it is growing. The technology that the farmers are expecting is definitely becoming higher and higher. And one of the cool things in Brazil is that the adoption rate of our farmers in Brazil compared to other countries in the world is very high. We have an average age of farmers of below 35 years. As Gabriela mentioned before, they are very IT focused, even if we don't have signal everywhere. They all are very fast and smart in using IoT, in developing their database into a digital database. And we from Bermad have helped startup companies from Israel in Brazil. We also helped the ecosystem in Brazil to help to get to know. So this is our team from Vermont. We have over 100 employees. And we have seen in the development that two of our main items have been very interesting for not only the Israeli ecosystem of startups and new companies in the AgTech, but also for the Brazilians. For example, the Exalc, their MBO that's going very strong, and they have a very strong support team for startups, and sometimes you have made a bridge. And we also have actually on the presentation from Gabriela was a picture from Vitor from Monitorar, is a startup that I actually also help, and it's supported by the Harvard Angels. And we have a very, very, very dynamic ecosystem here. And this is great, even if sometimes the laws and the regulations, as Thiago said, are jumping behind, but they're actually improving. And I think the main thing I wanted to say from both sides here, from the Brazilians that are joining, I see a lot of friends that are joining in this live, and from the Israeli side is we are very welcome to help from Vermont side to avoid something that I always joke. A lot of people come here with money and no experience, and after 3 years, they have a lot of experience and no money. Maybe we can help to avoid this. And the environment in Brazil is challenging, but on the other hand, it's a lot of opportunities, and we from Vermont are excited to be here. We are growing our business, even if it's not always easy. And now, especially during the COVID-19, I have to say that it's a pity that in general, the media, especially the Brazilian media, is broadcasting literally mainly bad news and not focusing at all and trying to bring a balance. Because as Gabriela said, our agribusiness is going very well. We'll probably have the best numbers ever in this first half of the year of our history. And with this many, I give it back to you. I think the next panelist is, whoops, I got the name now.
Bernarde, I would like to thank you very much for your presentation. I think that it is very important for all participants to see that Israeli agri-tech companies can indeed penetrate Brazil and can be successful in Brazil and can even learn from those who have already made it. So I think that this is very important. Now I would like to invite 4 panelists that include my partner, Ilana Soloducho, lawyer from Pearl Cohen, Israel, Shaul Shashua from IBI Tech, Moti Tagar from EY Israel, and Tzachi Reich, that it's an honor for us to host him here, is the Israeli Consul for Economic Affairs in Brazil. You have a difficult task. You are 4 Israelis and you have only 25 minutes to speak. So please go ahead.
Okay, I'll take it and go first. First of all, I would like to thank you all for joining us and to say to you and to encourage you to ask questions. You have on the side below the chat where you can raise your questions and we will address them at the end all together. And once I did that, I'll start my presentation. I'll make it. For me, it's really important. As many said at the beginning, I'm Uruguayan. I'm 12 years in Israel, but my law degree, I got it in Uruguay. So I share my love for both South America and Israel. And it's really important for me to get Israel and Latin America together, and mainly Brazil. I see how it can, the synergies between both regions, and we are really committed to make that happen. First of all, I know that my place here is to talk about how to work with Israelis, but I think that I cannot do that without 1 second presenting a tiny tasting of the Israeli AgTech and food tech ecosystem. I'm presenting to you here a map that you can find by yourself in the Startup Nation Central site. It presents clearly the size and the variety that the Israeli ecosystem has to offer. Israel has a rich history of agricultural innovation. Netafim is a great and huge example of that. It's the first water conserving and drip irrigation company in the world. It was acquired by Mexichem, that it's now Orbia. But it's one of many, plenty. Here we have over 500 AgriTech startups only, where we have 250 additional food tech startups. I think that for the Israeli reality and the Israeli size, it's remarkable, but Israeli being the startup nation is not news anymore. So we are here to help you understand how to do it with Israelis. Not why Israel, but how to safely land in Israel and how to safely collaborate with Israelis. First of all, when talking about negotiating between Latin Americans and Israelis, I think that we all tend to see the similarities. Both Israeli and Latin cultures are highly emotionally expressive. We are warm people. We can see that from the very beginning, but we have to take in mind that we have also differences, that Israelis are confrontational and Latin American people less. We can see here in the slide that Israeli is on the most confrontational side of the graphic, while Brazil is clearly on the avoid confrontation side of the graphic. But that is one of many characteristics that the Israeli have. I think that it's really important to understand how the Israelis negotiate in order to take things less personal and to get the best from a negotiation process that you can. Israelis are very straightforward, are emotional in the way they talk. You can see that when you are sitting in the table and you hear them raising their voice and interrupting people talking. I must say that I learned that from Israelis, and I have to work on that a little bit, in order to work with these South Americans. I also think that it's important to be aware that Israelis are argumentative people. They tend to disagree and to do that openly. When they don't agree or they see something that they don't like, they talk about that, and it's not their intention is not to offend no one. Also because of the military past, and because that Israel is not a hierarchical society, people tend to talk, and it doesn't depend on the rank or on the position of each person for them to express themselves or to allow themselves to disagree. It's something that happens. It's not an issue of manners, and it's not offensive. It's just the way it is. And another important and really important thing to take into account in order to work with Israeli startups is that the timelines and the time expectations for Israelis are really, really, really different from Latin American times. Things in Israel happen fast or they don't. And it's also a fact and a part of the Israeli culture, but it's also a fact related to the startup having a short lifespan, and that's what it's a necessity for the startup to work quickly. And when you consider working with a startup, it's something that you need to be aware of. We have gathered very basic and really important points for Brazilian companies to take into consideration when collaborating with Israeli companies. The main things that Brazilian companies can look into the Israeli ecosystem are tech exploration, innovation, scouting and learning, and each company knows what he's looking for in Israel, and it is important to know what you are looking for. We strongly suggest for you that before you take a plane and come with a delegation, or before you came here to Israel and to start talking to a startup that has a product or an idea that you think that is cool, that you do your homework, think about what are your needs, what are your focus areas, and the strategy to get that done. In order to do that, you need to define your goals and your needs before you go and start a collaboration. Another really important point is to investigate ahead. You are coming into a different reality with players that you don't know and with rules that you don't know. So you need to check the target companies that you are considering to work with, check reference, make due diligence, check their legal situation, their IP situation. We have here also our patent expert in agriculture, Ophir, that could answer any question that you will have in regarding with IP issues. Also, financial and technological due diligence are really important before you get into any engagement with a company. Israeli has its own reality also in connection with IP issues. Startups are not used, and it's not standard in Israel to share ownership on the IP at the very beginning, and it's something that you need to be aware of from the beginning. In case you'd like to have exclusivity, because that's the reason that you are starting a long process of collaboration with an Israeli company, and that you have set your goals. So exclusivity, it's a thing that you should put on the table from the very beginning, as well as to check the ability to export the IP. We have great programs and benefits from the Israeli government and the Israeli Innovation Authority that I'm sure that Tzachi will talk about them later, so I won't get into them, but they sometimes limit the possibility of exporting the IP, where the Israeli Innovation Authority has invested or provided grants. And those are reasons that we strongly advise you to get professional advice. It's not it doesn't sound reasonable that I'm the one saying that, but I really think that as Bernard's saying regarding Brazil, I think that you need to know your rights. You need to know the standard in the industry in order to make the best out of your effort. An important, really important issue with Israelis is that in Israeli, you get things in writing. Israelis make their engagement in writing, and it's important to document any understanding you'll have in Israel. And last issue now, it's that we recommend that you use your leverage from the very beginning. Once you know what your needs are and you have set your goals, you should put them on the table, prepare a step-by-step plan in order to get you there, and take that into consideration from the very beginning when you are planning a proof of concept with an Israeli startup, or when you are scouting for a specific technology. And I think that's all the time I have. I'm here for questions, and I'm available in any case that you'll have further questions.
Ilana, thank you very much. I cannot say anything about your presentation because I am your partner. So we will move forward, and I will ask Shaul Shashua from AgriTech to give the presentation.
Okay, thank you. I will share my screen. Okay, first of all, thank you, Ilana, for inviting me to this great event, to this panel. I want also to thank you, the Israel-Brazil Chamber of Commerce, also for the opportunity to be here. So thank you, and thank you all for joining this live. AgriTech is about myself first. I am Brazilian born, living in Israel for more than 30 years, and conducting business between Israel and Brazil for the last 10 years. So we have a lot of experience that I want to share a bit with you here. AgriTech is a consultancy company, innovation and technology consultancy company, the Israeli one. We have also our company in Brazil. So we are very well states in both countries trying to bridge and to bring closer these two nations. AgriTech focused mainly on technology and innovation projects. So I will start to say that Israel today in Brazil is very well positioned as a technology and solution provider. It's also part of the new political relationship, close political relationship in the last 2 years between Israeli and Brazilian governments that brought the visibility into the Israeli opportunities and how we can bring these both countries more close. So this is a good starting point. But first of all, Israeli companies that intend to enter the Brazilian market need to understand that they are not alone. There are local and international competition. Okay, and even if we talk about the AgriTech ecosystem, Brazil today has a strong Brazilian AgriTech ecosystem that competes and can compete and with the Israeli companies, and they are bringing very good results. So any Israeli company that is trying to enter the Brazilian market needs to do a good market research and business intelligence research to understand what its added value, what they are really bringing to the market. As Gabriela already said, Brazil is a single name for a huge country. Brazil is huge, and Israelis don't understand it. Sitting here in Brazil, there is a quiet joke, a common joke that many Israelis ask me if I work only in Brazil or in all Latin America countries. So this just to show you that it's very difficult to understand the size of Brazil sitting here. And also Brazil, as also Gabriela said, there is no one Brazil. And even in agriculture, there are many Brazilian markets. There are many Brazilian agriculture markets. So for Israeli companies that are trying to enter the market, again, you need to understand where do you want to focus, what is your added value. You cannot embrace and conquer Brazil in a single step. About business environment, although Thiago tried to paint a pinkier status or situation of the business environment, of the Brazilian business environment, yes, it's getting better, but it's still complex and it's still lengthy to conduct business in Brazil. So I strongly suggest to use professional advice, to use local lawyers, to use also Israeli law offices that can help you to get the bridge or to close the gap between these two countries. Also about taxes, investing capital. How is the best way to invest capital in Brazil? How is the best way to bring back capital? So this is very important. So again, use professional advice. There are many and more also law offices that two of them are here in this panel that can give you a very good professional advice. About business culture, okay, Brazilian customers are expecting more and more that the foreigner companies that are entering the Brazilian market, they have a local presence, that they can ring, they call a 55 number in their time zone, and they can be and feel that are more closer to the customer. So Israeli companies, they are trying to enter the market, the Brazilian market, they need to have a plan of creating a local presence, either by making their own subsidiary or joining. This is what I recommend, to make a partnership with a local company. It's not easy to find a local company to fit your needs, but it's worth the effort. So, and also to look at Brazil as a long-lasting relationship. It's not a short endeavor. We will not go for 1 year and come back. Brazil, you need to think about Brazil as a long-lasting relationship with your clients, with your customers, with the country. You need to understand that Brazil is a very special country that values people that want to be part of their story, their personal story, their personal success, and they really value such companies that are willing to do it. I want to talk about an issue, okay, that is very important when doing business in Brazil, and we are quite now in this Corona or COVID times, that we need to think about how to tackle let's say, this challenge. Personal relationship. Personal relationship in Brazil, what they say, comes first, second, and third in doing business in Brazil. This is very important. Everybody that works with Brazil knows how important is the personal relationship with your clients. Okay, we Brazilian companies sometimes are huge corporates. And when you're dealing with these huge corporates, you don't deal with the corporate. Okay, you deal with some people in these corporates, and creating a personal relationship is very, very important. Brazilian or business in Brazil, okay, is conducted based on trust. Trust is it's very important for Brazilian people. It's very important to build in order to have a success business. And it takes time and effort to build. You need to have it in your plan when going to Brazil, that you need to invest effort to build trust. Everybody knows, every Brazilian knows what they say, edge confiança, is trustworthy. It's a magic phrase in Brazil that it opens many doors. AgriTech works mainly in innovation processes. And these processes are inherently riskier. So trust in these processes is even more relevant. Another thing for Israelis to understand is the failure cost in Brazil. In Israeli culture, failing is not so bad, but in Brazil is. So this is a cultural gap, and Brazilians expect from Israeli companies and foreign companies to understand this issue and to help them not to fail. So how to bring and how to build such a trust and a personal relationship in Corona times, in COVID times? We have no flights, fewer face-to-face meetings. So first of all, my suggestion is that you use a trust agent with good connections, with good network in both countries. Second, you need to improve your digital communication skills, to communicate better, to communicate often, to be more precise. And don't forget, in the end, don't forget that you are doing business with people, and you need to maintain and to keep personal level communication even in these times. So,
Shaul, sorry to interrupt. I don't like being the bad boy, the bad guy,
okay.
but I have to make sure that also the
Okay.
two last presenters will have some significant time. So if you could conclude.
Okay, so I concluded, I think doing business in Brazil is challenging, but it's very interesting. There are many, many opportunities for Israeli companies, and we are here to help. Thank you very much.
Shaul, we thank you very much. And now I would like to ask Moti Tagar from EY Israel to communicate this presentation. Moti, I believe you are on mute.
Okay, so thank you very much. First, I would like to thank Ilana for this great opportunity and for this great webinar on this very interesting and challenging jurisdiction. I'm Moti Tagar. I'm an international tax partner in EY Israel. I'm here also with Carla, with my manager. And Ilana, just as you said, we have different cultures. So Carla was born in Argentina, much more polite. I'm a little bit more direct. You may see it during this session. In this session, we would like to talk about certain tax considerations investing in Brazil and both for Brazilian investing in Israel. We heard that this audience includes both types, so we will try to split the time and talk about these two interesting subjects. So Brazil, it's considered to be a very complicated tax jurisdiction. The tax system which is currently in place includes multiple taxation types from the federal and the provincial and municipal, something like almost 40 types of taxations. It is very challenging for Israeli investors doing business in Brazil because of this very untypical tax system. But there is some kind of, at least that has been published, that there is intention to do a reform in the tax system in Brazil. This is a proposal. We do not yet know if this would be passed, also with the political situation which is currently in Brazil, but there is some kind of vision to change the tax system in Brazil. So let's start focus on what it is currently in place in Brazil. Brazil does not have a very large treaty network, but there is a very good, comparing to the others, a very good treaty with Israel. Brazil, for companies that has turnover which is below 78 Brazilian real, there is an opportunity for them to opt between two systems, two methods to compute their taxes. One of the method is called the actual tax method. The other is the presumed tax method. There is a real difference between these two methods, which can be opted from year to year. So it is possible to change the method from year to year as long as you are a company with turnover lower than 78 million real, which is equal to around $15 million. So this is very interesting, because if we are getting into the so-called presumed method, it means that there is totally indifferent to the level of expenses in Brazil. And in that case, for example, if we do not have a lot of local expenses and we want to keep Brazil in a low margin, in most cases what we would do we will, under the transfer pricing, take as much as possible out from Brazil. But if we are in the presumed method, we do not need to have this significant intercompany transaction into Brazil, and it is possible to provide Brazil with some sort of a transaction which is not at arm's length, because Brazil is not sensitive to the level of expense. Why this is very important? Because most of the payments going out from Brazil with respect to intercompany are subject to withholding taxes and multiple taxes, a lot of taxes, which can come up to around 40%. So the presumed method may provide an opportunity to hedge, to limit the level of taxation in Brazil, and not to introduce an intercompany transaction which will be at arm's length. On the other hand, when we are talking about the actual method, it's the real P&L, and you will need to put charges into Brazil, and you could be exposed to high taxes upon repatriation from Brazil by means of the payment on the transfer pricing. In a very high level, in terms of taxation rates, the tax rate in Brazil, it is an overall rate, an effective rate of 34%, which is high. If you are going to the presumed, for example, it's still 34%, but it is computed on some sort of a profit margin that is derived from industry to industry. For example, for the service industry, it can be something like 32%. So in overall, in the presumed method, we can be in an effective tax rate of 13% on the turnover, and not exposed to potential withholding taxes and tax burdens on the payments going out from Brazil.
Moti, I am sorry to interrupt. If I can ask you if you can conclude within 2 minutes, please.
Okay. Okay, so this is one thing which is very important when we are talking about investments in Brazil. Because Brazil is a high tax jurisdiction, we can find advantages in electing from method to method, from year to year, in order to manage your taxes. So this is one thing which is very important. The second thing which is important is that because we have a very good treaty with Brazil, we can do, if we are in an actual method, or if our turnover is higher than the 78 million real, we can structure the transaction with Israel in a way that the withholding taxes will be very limited, and also other taxes will not apply to it, like CDE, PIS, COFINS, and so on. So this is could be very good opportunity when we are going into Brazil and trying to manage the taxes. For those Brazilian residents that would like to come and invest in Israel, Israel is providing, as you may know, very low tax rates and tax incentives for the high-tech industry. But in Brazil, the tax system in Brazil is as such that it has a very aggressive CFC regime, and also a capital gain tax regime. So everything which happens in Israel, for example, in the level of the subsidiary, immediately flows to the level of the Brazilian resident and being taxed under the CFC regime at 34%, if we are talking about Brazilian company. In that case, the main thing that we need to do in order to defer the taxes is to rely on the principles in Brazil of computing the profits of a CFC, which are relying on the gap of the local country. So for example, if we have a Brazilian company investing in an Israeli company, then the question would be if we would like to do a direct investment or an indirect investment in order to move, for example, upon exit from direct taxation in Brazil into a CFC taxation in Brazil, which could be more manageable. because of the difference calculation, computation of the profits. So just to summarize everything, Brazil is trying to be a little bit more welcoming in terms of its tax environment. It introduced some kind of reform, which is not yet passed. It's not yet clear if and when it will be passed. Until then, we are in a system which is very challenging for both inbound and outbound, but there are a lot of opportunities, albeit this challenging environment, to maximize the efficiency upon repatriation and the effective tax rate.
Sorry, thank you very much for your presentation. I believe that you concluded just on time. I would like to ask, last but not least, Tzachi Reich is the Israeli Consul for Economic Affairs in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I think that his participation at this webinar shows the commitment of the State of Israel and the interest of the State of Israel in facilitating further transactions between Brazil and Israel. So Tzachi, please.
Many, thank you very much. And thank you, Ilana, for letting me take part in this really great webinar. For the Brazilians, I'm probably the barrier with lunch, so I will try to be quick. Let me share my screen. Here we go. Okay, so basically I am a representative of the Ministry of Economy and Industry, and we are a network of 44 trade missions around the world, and our goal is basically to support Israeli companies to really bridge and connect with local entities. And part of our activities include delegation, creating meetings, providing professional information, overcoming some regulatory and trade barriers that entities can face. And especially during this, let's say, challenging days with COVID-19, a majority of our work is really transformed into the digital platform, where, as I agree completely with what Shaul mentioned previously, the personal connection and utilizing the fact that you are dealing with trustworthy entities and people can really help overcoming the physical barrier, which is very significant for Brazilians. So a bit about the economies. Israel and Brazil are complementary economies. Brazil is one of the 10 largest export countries for Israel, with around $1.5 billion of trade. And it's worth mentioning that Israel was the first country outside of Latin America to sign a bilateral agreement with Mercosur. And since the beginning of 2019, all of the items in the agreement has zero custom taxations. As you've already heard, there's a lot of other taxations, but this is most definitely putting the Israeli and the Brazilian in a much better place to conduct trade. It is also worth mentioning that in the past 2 years, we signed 2 agreements between the Israel Innovation Authority and Embrapi and FINEP here in Brazil. We had the first call for proposal out during last year, during 2019, with really great success. And we are happy to announce that we're going to be going out with a second call with Embrapi, most likely by the end of July. So please follow this. These are great platforms to connect with Brazilian entities, do together R&D projects, where the loans that each party is receiving is a conditional loan. So if the process is successful, the project is successful and there are sales, you pay back the loan, and if not, it becomes a grant and forgiven. But moreover than that, we understood that there are unique challenges for any company, no matter what sector they come from, coming into Brazil. And for that, we initiated the program called Scale Up in Brazil. This is a program which we did with collaboration with Apex Brazil and ABV Cap. And we had the first program during 2019, again with great success. The program is all about making the best landing pad for Israeli tech firms that want to really penetrate and succeed in the best way in Brazil. The second batch is now open for registration until the end of the month. And please look at it. This could be a great platform also for you to penetrate this very interesting market in the best way. I'll end with mentioning that we also have, as part of the ministry, two tools to support the Israeli exporters when they try to penetrate a new market or promote a new product into an existing one. One is called Shalav and the other one is Kesef Chacham. Both programs are now open for registrations until the end of July, more or less. So please follow this. We can provide you with more information. And just to end my presentation, I think you got a really excellent overview of the agriculture opportunities in Brazil. This is probably the most important sector that Brazil has. And this is one of the most innovative sectors that Israel has as well. And there is great potential in this collaboration, taking in mind that this is challenging, it's not easy, but it's definitely possible. So thank you all for taking part.
Tzachi, I thank you very much for your presentation. I would like to now to move to the questions, and we also would like to terminate the webinar on time, so we will be able to address only one question. It's a question that was raised by Gustavo Resende, and it's addressed to Gabriela Coser from CNA. And Gustavo would like to ask Gabriela whether CNA has any kind of organic versus conventional breakdown of the numbers that you have shown.
So about this data, actually, I'm not really sure if there is, because data in the agricultural sector is a really complex issue. As we showed, there's a lot of local characteristics. So we have some data from CONAB, but I think it's most related to the price paid for the products, but not for the specific value of production of organic versus conventional. And also we have some data in the agricultural census from IBGE, but I'm not pretty sure about which specific data Gustavo is talking about. So maybe he can send me a mail letter and we can talk about it. Maybe I can help with it.
Gabriela, thank you for your answer. Firstly, I would like to mention that we received some additional questions and they will be addressed later on in writing or by Zoom. I would like to, first of all, to thank all the people that participated at the panels, including, I also would like to thank the Israel-Brazil Chamber of Commerce that was also provided important assistance for this webinar. And of course, I thank you personally and on behalf of all the organizers, all the participants that devoted the 1.5 hours of your important time to your participation at this webinar. I hope that you feel that this was worthwhile, and all participants are, needless to say, available to help you to, as we said, to make things happen. This is possible, and it will be our pleasure to be of assistance to all of you. And last but not least, I would like to wish you that you stay safe and beware of the coronavirus, and good luck to all of us. Thank you all for your participation and see you soon again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hello.